Hi, everybody. I just wanted to come on here and introduce you to the ninth installation, the ninth section of my Talking Away the Taboo series. I'm super excited about talking with Dvora Entin. Dvora is a licensed social worker in the field, and she speaks all over the country, and she's really she's one of the people that I look to when I am struggling with trying to find a way to bring certain ideals to you. And she's really just she's very wise, and she has a lot of background, a lot of training. She also does, she has private clients. She speaks to a lot of different kinds of audiences, both in the religious Jewish world and in the non-religious world. And I'm just thrilled to be able to have her. I know that she's coming on in a few minutes, so I look forward to having her. I just wanted to, while I'm just waiting for her to join, I also just wanted to just address sort of my feelings about everything that's been going on in the community in the last... I'm here, Dvora. Give me 1 second. I'm on live. I'm waiting for you to come on. So I'm just waiting for her. So let's give it a few more seconds. So I found it hard to be on social media over the last few days. I was just inundated with all of the imagery and the different posts that people are making, just talking about the last few weeks of the uptick in anti-Semitic attacks. And I just found it hard to be on here. I really wanted to focus on sort of closing my walls and being with my family and being with the friends and the people who I love and enjoy. And I didn't want to hear about the outside world so much as we were praying and davening for them and hoping that they would all... Here she is, she's coming, that they would, have a complete refuah shalema, that they would have a healing as soon. I really wanted to just sort of take a step back and focus on my family and my time. And here she is.
Sorry about that.
No, it's all good. It's all good. It gave me an opportunity to just talk for a minute or two just about the world in which we live right now, and how we're all sort of grappling and trying to deal with it in our own way, and just how I actually took a step back for the last few days from social media, because I really couldn't handle all of the imagery and the different things that people are posting, and I wanted to focus on my personal family and our friends and my circle. And that was kind of the way I dealt with it. I mean, I know this is not our topic at hand, but it's all really on our minds right now. And so I just figured, I would take the opportunity for those few minutes. I don't know if you want to comment for a few minutes about it.
It's just interesting how you describe, taking a step back and kind of finding what works for you when dealing with something difficult. And I think that that's really what we are about to talk about. We're about to talk about that there are things in our lives that really kind of rock us to the core and really kind of unroot us. And what do we do when that happens? And who do we turn to? And who is our source of connection and support? And what do we need to do in order to feel the feet beneath us one more time?
100%. Yeah, I think that's exactly it, and that's an excellent segue to the topic at hand. Let me just, for all of you who don't know Dvora, and if you don't know Dvora, you should know Dvora, but let me tell you a little bit more about her and give you her official bio. So I'm going to do just the short version, because I think your work and your experience really speaks for itself. Dvora is a licensed social worker, licensed clinical social worker, and there's this new classification in perinatal mental health. It's PMH-C. So I'm going to ask you what that's about in 1 second.
Sure.
It's advanced training in perinatal mental health from a few different acronyms, which I'm not familiar with, but you'll tell all of us also.
Sure.
PSI, ASRM, and the MISS, MISS Foundation, with a private practice in maternal mental health. She consults nationally about perinatal and reproductive health challenges and directs the Safety Kit Initiative for child sexual abuse in all Philadelphia Jewish day schools. So just explain a little bit more about what these different organizations are and your team, just so for people who are not familiar.
Sure. So I think that, I think that over the last probably 10 to 15 years, we've come to an understanding that, we used to just like check boxes on Psychology Today. What do you treat? Oh, yeah, I treat infertility. Oh, yeah, I treat pregnancy loss. Oh, yeah, I teach couple. It was like kind of this like, amorphous. Oh, yeah, I can do that. I'm sure I can figure it out. And we've come to a much deeper understanding, although yet not fully supported by our diagnostic manual and committee, on the issues that relate to maternal wellness, that we have issues that relate to motherhood and mothering and pregnancy and reproductive years that really have kind of a life of their own. And so just like in the last 10 to 15 years or so, we now can have a specialization in reproductive psychiatry, that you can have a fellowship, you can become a general psychiatrist, and then you can do a fellowship for a year or so in reproductive psychiatry and how to treat women who are pregnant or wanting to be pregnant with mental health issues. So too in the broader psychiatric or psychological world, our community has come to a greater awareness of what additional training is needed. So PSI to me is the standard of care. It's Postpartum Support International. They really are an international resource for education and support for those that are in struggle. They're exceptional in what they've been able to accomplish on historically in a volunteer-only budget. And we could talk a little more about their resources at some other time. And then they do a 3-day training, and then you get a certificate in that. As an outgrowth of that, they've now extended that to a national certificate program, which is that PMH-C. So that's an exam that you sit for and continuing education that shows that you are indeed interested in that area. ASRM is the American Society of Reproductive Medicine, who has now expanded their mental health training to additional 18 credits of education. And that's really my area on infertility and pregnancy loss. And then the MISS Foundation is an intensive program through an organization out in Sedona, Arizona, that trains on compassionate bereavement. And that's really the frame in which I work for the pregnancy loss program.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Look, tell me, I guess, how did you come to this field? Why did you, obviously you also have the other piece of your training, the other piece of your work is in sexual abuse, but how did you specifically come to the maternal mental health field, and what led you there, and then how you developed your practice and so on and so forth?
Sure. So it's interesting because I wouldn't tell you that I knew this term, even maternal mental health, until maybe 10 years ago. Like I didn't even know that as a term. I never had any coursework in social work school, in any continuing education workshops on this. It wasn't part of my kind of language. But I always had this like connection and passion, even before I became a therapist, with interest in educating and becoming more sensitive to the needs of those that are in struggle relating to infertility and losses. And I can't tell you how that happened directly, but I can look back on my times as a Niche manager, like a Niche organizer, and it was where, like, as a newlywed, and I would bring in like lectures on infertility, and so that's kind of how it kind of became something more professional. And I think that this has a very large umbrella of amazing growing research, growing information. It's not just like fly by the seat of your pants. It's based in important data. And that's how I got involved. And then ultimately I got connected with K'nafayim, and that's really the connection that launched my kind of direct service work, and became a volunteer on their phone lines. And I've been doing that for quite a number of years now. And that's really where I began to see firsthand and hear firsthand the stories of women. So
tell me more about your relationship with K'nafayim and your work there and the different pieces that you're part of.
Sure. So K'nafayim, I work, officially as a clinical consultant, as a volunteer. Malka Kloristefeld is the founder of that program, an exceptional woman in her own right, and really has created this space where women are allowed to get together, and men separately, to talk about things that really they had no other place to talk about. And how that has grown over the years, and I'm not even talking about the direct service stuff of attending at bedsides and things like that, but just from a direct support standpoint, we have groups now that are all virtual. So the anonymity, which really speaks to the cultural component of this community that we serve, the anonymity of being able to just get on a phone line at 9 o'clock at night, meeting, as we say in social work school, we meet the clients where they're at. Where they're at is 9 p.m. at night when their house is finally quieter. And we get on phone lines. Sometimes they're more structured. Sometimes they're more open. We have a pregnancy loss one. We have ones for women who've had a very early infant loss. We have ones for women that have had to terminate pregnancies because of medical or fetal anomalies. We have ones for women that have had an emergency hysterectomy and were rendered without a uterus after, and being very young women, many of whom had only had one child. So these like very unique niche populations that around the, you look out in the public world, their pain is very internal. They look great, but nobody knows what they're struggling with. And how do you have that conversation with someone? And how do I speak the same language as somebody else unless we're in the same room and I know that you are struggling with the same thing? And that's really, it was my intro, and hearing the thread of uniform experiences that these women are having with their mother-in-laws, with their mothers, with their siblings, with Yontif. It just developed into so much, it is such a robust program in terms of really getting the needs of our community when it comes to pregnancy loss. And I'm forever grateful for that connection and for that access to really more deeply understand the pain of women and their families as they go through pregnancy loss.
And so do you, so let's sort of delve right into it. Explain to me, one of the things that I know you wanted to talk about in this call is you wanted to talk about the pregnancy after loss, or I even also wanted to add to it and talk about the pregnancy after infertility. There's obviously a lot of overlap, but a lot of pieces that are unique. But can you speak a little bit about that and give a little bit of support at please up to those people who are specifically in those shoes right at this moment?
Yes. So I think that what I think is one of the most most unspoken about and misunderstood situations themselves in, right? Hopefully we're landed in this place of pregnancy post something. Pregnancy loss is a trauma. Infertility process is a trauma. These are things that are, we are not addressing that when we are in a recovered state. So I say, now we're pregnant and hopefully this time things are going to end better, right? And I'm going to finally be able to hold this baby in my arm that I had been dreaming about for years, right? However long I've been going through this process of infertility, or this process of having had one or recurrent losses. And I'm here, and in the public world, I'm doing great. I'm pregnant, right? I have this beautiful belly, and everyone's I'm so happy for you. I'm so happy for you. And no one is saying, and tell me how you're really doing. How are you sleeping? Because what I'm hearing from women is this excessive and extensive experience of living in this hypervigilant state, right? We use the term hypervigilant with those that are coming back from war, right? Our officers that are our military men and women who are coming back from war. Every time they turn a corner, they're looking around the corner and they expect that could be an IED could explode, that somebody could jump out and harm them. They're always on alert. When a woman has had a pregnancy loss and has gone through infertility, there's no sense of safety in my own space. It's at any moment there is this threat that it could be taken away from me any minute. And no amount of physician offering their magic ball and saying I'm telling you everything looks good, you're gonna have a healthy baby, nor should a physician really promise that. But, put that aside. But, no amount of promises, no amount of medical knowledge and experience will convince me that this baby is gonna be mine. And even sometimes in the postpartum, what I've seen is that, so the baby's finally here and now I should be happy, right? I'm supposed to be happy. And instead, we are stuck with this deep feeling of confusion and a deep feeling of worry and intrusive thinking. What if something happens to this baby? What if this baby, if I only was granted this baby, especially sometimes there's some very complex spiritual components of it. Maybe Hashem only gave me this baby for this 9 months, and maybe Hashem's going to take the baby away. Maybe I wasn't supposed to have this baby, and I somehow wrestled this baby from God's hands. A lot of spiritual stuff there. But ultimately, you're dealing with a very heightened state of anxiety. And to the public eye, I look good. To the personal experience, this is really complicated. And the guilt and shame of feeling those complex feelings is layered on top of it, because again, I'm supposed to be fill in the blank.
Correct.
So, and I think that, again, that's why I think that, we're talking more about pregnancy loss. We're talking more about infertility, but are we talking about the next piece? And I do encourage, from a, just validating that experience so loudly is critical. And also offering women that permission to say, this is really hard. Like, this was not what I anticipated, and it's okay for you to tell me that as a therapist. It's okay for you to tell me that. And I give you permission to say, this really is difficult and I'm really overwhelmed, or I'm so sad all the time, and getting help for those feelings and support.
Right. And in addition to that, what you also were just starting to touch on as well is also the lack of bonding potentially with that pregnancy, the lack of bonding potentially with that child when the child is born, that the entire system breaks down when you're, I love the word that you use, this hypervigilant state. I mean, in my own layman's terms, so I use the hyper anxious state, like that, that's effectively what it is. But this hypervigilance piece of constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop, constantly waiting for that roadside bomb to go off, where you're constantly in that state and you never know what's going to happen because you've experienced this sudden trauma beforehand and you don't know if it's going to happen again. And so
and I never saw it coming the first time. Don't forget that. I never saw it coming. So if I'm, and this is what I'll hear from women, they'll say, well, I'm not going to attach to this pregnancy. And I'll look at them and be like, good luck. Because no matter, we've already attached the second we're pregnant. Now, the reality is that for women that have had recurrent losses, the idea of attachment to a pregnancy is much more complicated. And my job is to reassure them that that attachment can take place later. I had a woman who said to me openly, she said to me, and I had been supporting her through the entire pregnancy after many, many losses. And she finally, thank God, had a baby, a healthy baby, everything was well. And she said to me, I feel like I just found out I was pregnant yesterday. She's like, what happened to those 40 weeks? Where did they go? And I said, and I bore witness to those 40 weeks because they were torture. But for her, it was like, I just found out I was pregnant yesterday. Who is this baby and why is this baby looking at me as mother? And there was a complex attachment for her, from a very clinical perspective, it's a complex attachment, but I wasn't worried because, and I think that's part of the reassurance piece, is letting women understand that that's okay. You have to do what works for you. So it's interesting because, Amy, I would avoid using the term normal because, and I'll tell you why, because normal, to me, to some degree, there's a risk of normal feeling like it actually disempowers me from my experience as being something very painful. So it's abnormal to be in the state of multiple losses and now carrying a pregnancy and now having to deal with this. It's not fair that I had one mom who said to me, it's not fair that my new baby has a bereaved mother. Powerful. She said, it's not fair that my child has a bereaved mom as a parent. I want my child should have had a happy and joyful and celebratory mom. And instead, he has a bereaved mom. So I don't know what normal means anymore. So for me, yes, there's a normalization of the experience.
Correct. That's really what I meant.
I know you do. And I'm gonna tear that piece out a little bit because I sometimes feel oh, that's so normal, that it actually can lessen the intensity of what I'm feeling, and not in a good way. I want someone to say to me, that is so painful. That is so difficult. Of course you're having a hard time. It makes sense to me that you're having a hard time. I respect that you're I honor the hard time that you're having rather than the normalization of it. Like, think about it. When you had a newborn baby and you said to me, oh my God, I'm so exhausted. And someone was like, oh, of course, it's so normal. Like, you're not going to sleep for like 6 months, right? And you're like, but I'm trying to express to you that I'm in distress. And so if you normalize it, then it's almost like, well, then I don't have a right to be distressed anymore. Correct. Right? Correct. Different way of looking at the word.
Right. It's a flip, meaning you're the person who's giving you that notion is trying at the end of the day to validate your feelings. But instead, what ends up coming out or something might be heard is something completely different. So
correct.
It's an excellent point.
Correct. Excellent right. Point. Exactly.
And so so specifically for this woman who came to you and said, I'm worried because, or I'm concerned because I want my child to have a celebratory mother instead of having a bereaved mother. But then the notion of that, it's not too late to quote fix, and that it's okay to sort of be in this state of where you're protecting yourself, and I'm trying to sort of link the two stories and figure out how do you, the story of the woman who, you know, just woke up and has a baby in her arms and said, oh my gosh, like, you know, here's my child, and what happened to the entire pregnancy? And then the woman who says the same, you know, maybe a different woman, or even the same woman who says, I wish my child had a celebratory mother instead of a bereaved mother. Like, what do you say, and sort of what's the process for those women to then have a different experience with their children afterwards, to have more of the celebratory pieces, to feel more whole in that experience for them?
It's a great question. And I think what I would challenge the question with is that I don't know that the goal is to give them that experience. So my response to any woman who would say something like to me, like, it's not fair that my child has a bereaved mom, I would say, and what is that like for you? What is it like for you to be a bereaved mother of a new baby? What do you feel like you're missing? And then I might say, what does you feel like, what does this offer you as a new mother? What does that bereaved mom experience offer you in this moment? My intent, that post-traumatic growth piece that you're kind of pushing towards,
right,
is something that's so important that we allow each person to get there or to not get there. So she may sit in the bereaved mom space, and my responsibility to her is to allow that. And if she says to me, I don't want to be a bereaved mom space, I need to be able to, I want to find joy. And I will say, okay, so how can the two live in tandem? How can you be a bereaved mom? Because part of the challenge of that is, if I'm no longer a bereaved mom, then have I disrespected the baby that died? Right? So I would leave, these women will say, if I'm happy, then I'm not sad. And if I'm not sad, then I'm forgetting.
Right.
And it's disrespectful and disloyal to the child that died. So I might say, how would we allow the two to be in the same space? How can we allow you to be the bereaved mom and the celebratory mom? So I might say, are there moments that you are fully mindful and present with this child? What it would be like for you to be fully mindful and present? What does that actually look like? Not just like theoretically, but like actually look like when you, and that was one of the things, like with the, you know, with the mom who said to me, I'm just looking at this baby and going, who is this baby? I'll say, and I'm also watching you, mom, stroking the baby. And you're kissing the baby and you're touching the baby's face. So I know that you're attaching.
Right.
I'm not worried about your attachment. And I will reflect that back to her. I'm noticing your attachments. I'll say, what happens when you stroke the baby's face? What can you think about when you stroke the baby's face? So giving a parent, and really, you know, we're talking about moms, but really we are talking about parents, right? We're talking about both partners in this relationship, because both can struggle differently, but both can be struggling. So I might allow for, really the goal is to allow them to create space for both processes, the process of the bereaved mother, the process of the hypervigilant mother, the process of the post-trauma mom, as well as the new mother. And how does that work on an integrative way that we can authentically experience both of them?
It's so interesting that you're saying this, right? And having these pieces simultaneously, because it's interesting. There was a there's another handle on Instagram. Her name is Chemi, and I don't remember her last name, but her handle is Miss Conception Coach, MISS Conception Coach. And she had, about a month ago, she had an entire dialogue with her followers about how, is it appropriate, and I'm using the word appropriate very loosely here, but is it appropriate to have hashtags on photos of pregnant bellies or of babies or children? Is it appropriate to have the hashtag infertility survivor,
or like rainbow baby?
Correct. Because what is that? So what does that exactly mean? It's the you survived something and here you are. It's the it brings up the people who are searching under those hashtags. It potentially could trigger them because they're seeing pictures of babies or pregnant children, babies or pregnant bellies. But to have this notion of sort of sitting with an experience and having both sides of it, both sides of the coin, sort of sitting with someone, is a very fascinating sort of piece to kind of try to tackle. And you're doing that, I mean, with these couples and these families in this specific work in a different way.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the words that I like to work towards is grateful and grieving. Right. And especially somebody from a religious background, if somebody is in the space of grieving when they're holding a new baby, they're saying, like I'm being disrespectful, like I'm being a kafoi tov, I'm rejecting the goodness that I have and that I've been given. If I'm grieving, then if I'm grateful, then I shouldn't be grieving anymore. Like how can I hold the two?
Yes.
And really helping them understand that process of being grateful and grieving are two, yes, incongruent, and yet both can be experienced simultaneously. But the other thing that you bring up is that idea of that we will never always get it right when we do. I mean, in general, we will never always get it right when it comes to things like being sensitive or saying the right thing or not saying the right thing, and commenting or not commenting. And I think that's what I find that is so challenging is I'll have 50% of women who will say, let's say post stillbirth. 50% of these women on the call with me will say, don't you say one word. Don't acknowledge that baby that died. Don't say, well, I will deal with it on my own. Let's say coming back to work, right? I will deal with this on my own. I don't want to discuss this with you. Just treat me normal, right? Treat me normally. Yeah. And then the other 50%, the other 50 will say to me, how could you not have said anything? How could we be standing at the water cooler and you didn't even acknowledge that that a baby just died, like that I had just had a birth and a baby and I just came back post delivery, etc. Like, so 50 and 50. I mean, literally, like it would say split down the middle. So yeah. Some of that challenges when we say, do we tag? Do we not tag? You know, we're straddling a very complicated line.
Right. And I think I mean, so then what is your answer? What do you say? What do you say to all of those people, the coworkers, the friends, the relatives? What do you say? I mean, because I get this question all the time, and I always err on the side of, expressing sort of this general comment of how you doing, which sort of, lobs it out there and allows them to share if they want, or otherwise you're like, I'm fine. What's going on? Like, just leave me alone. So I'm curious what you say, what you suggest.
Well, the first and foremost thing is I don't ask any questions. I make statements, and I would encourage others to do the same. So one of the things that I learned from my mother, okay? My mother always had cards that were written with her name on them. My mother's name is Heather, and my mother's card would say Heather on them. I always felt like all married women have these beautiful cards that say have their first name on them. Like their husbands had no place on the cards. It's lovely. And I, in my own marriage, have done that multiple times. But what did my mother use the Heather cards for? My mother would write notes. Somebody was diagnosed, somebody had a divorce, somebody had a death in the family. My mother, I'm just wanting you to know that I'm thinking about you, and I've been thinking about all that you've been going through, sending you much love, Heather. And my mother would mail them in the mail, snail mail, okay? Not text messages, not emails, actual snail mail. And over the years, I've done the same. And what I've learned is that the people that you can handwrite a card to, first of all, it says, I've taken the time more than just, this is another pet peeve of mine, more than just writing BDE on your post, please don't write BDE. If more than just posting, more than just texting, I've taken the time to handwrite you a card, to find the stamp, right? That's also a miracle. Find the stamp, find your address, and put it in my mailbox. What that's, I hope, conveys is that I really have internalized that you're going through a hard time. And so I'm communicating to you that imo anochi b'tzara, I'm sitting with you in your pain. And it's not really about what I'm saying or speaking about. It's really just being very present. If you are communicating with somebody, face to face, and I think that when somebody does come back to work and you have a relationship with them, you stop, you look them in the eye and you say, I know that you've been going through something so painful. And I just want you to know that I've been thinking of you. And that's it. And be quiet and be still. Not just like, okay, I'm going to go get some dessert now. You want a coffee? Or just bringing them a piece of cake and put it on the desk and say, I've been thinking about you. But asking the question of how you doing, the only response is fine. There's a great podcast. I'm sure you're familiar with Terrible Thanks for Asking, right? With Nora McInerney, like, I just adore. And like, she has her whole entire frame is like, I'm terrible. Thanks for asking. And it'll stop you in your tracks if somebody says that to you, but it's so socially inappropriate, right? Yep. So it's the statements versus questions. So I am thinking of you. Sometimes I will say, my heart hurts with you. And it might sound awkward to you at first, but like find the word that works for you. My heart hurts with you. And you see what I'm doing? I'm putting my hands on my chest, right? If I have a close relationship with somebody, I might say to them, is it okay if I give you a hug? But I've learned that not everybody wants that.
Correct.
And it's not perceived, it's me, then it almost feels like it's because of what I want versus what the other person wants. I will put a hand on their hands, I will put a hand on their arm if it's, again, socially and religiously appropriate. But a full acknowledgement is really, I think, better than no acknowledgement. And then the most important thing you
would say is, even for the people who say, don't talk about it, don't, I don't want to hear about it, just you would say, even just the, I just want to let you know I'm thinking about you.
Yes, because it gives
Even
permission
still.
for them to say absolutely nothing. Look, at the end of the day, I'm the one I have to go to bed with, right? I have to be the one who has to deal in a way that I feel is compassionate and ethical and respectful of those that are in pain around me. And so I would rather err on the side of that than on the side of maybe she doesn't really want me acknowledging it or saying anything. Now, that being said, if I've had no relationship with this woman and I've never said anything to her before in the office, then for me to walk up to her and say to her, I just want to let you know that I'm thinking about you and your loss, maybe not. But if I know this person and everybody was celebrating the future pregnancy, or we knew she was pregnant and then she wasn't anymore, then that acknowledgement. As a therapist, then sometimes if I have a relationship with this person, some of the other things that I will say to this person is something like, tell me about your sleep. Are you sleeping? Right. Because I don't even ask how you are, but I'll say, are you getting sleep? And it's interesting to hear that question answered. And they'll say, not so much, usually. Right. It gives permission for them to not be in the best state, but to acknowledge that they're going through a really hard time.
Right. I sometimes also say, when did you actually eat anything today yet? Like if it's at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, can I bring you a bowl of soup or something? Like I'll often do something like, because often, as we all know, when we're in some sort of crisis or post-grief, we forget to do things that we ordinarily would do, and hunger cues are often very muted.
Very much. And I think if you have a relationship with that person, even more so than saying, can I bring you, is I'm bringing you, just please, I'm leaving it at the door. You don't even have to come to the door. And I think that, I think back to different experiences in my life personally where we were dealing with some medical issue, and I'll never forget, like they showed up at the hospital carrying a bag of bagels. And I was like, I never even... and I've learned to do that, not as often, unfortunately, but like to just show up, here's a bag. I'm not staying. I'm not asking you any questions. I love you. I'm leaving. And even just leave it at the door and say, I'm texting you that it's at the door and bye. Don't come to the door. You don't have to get dressed. You don't have to put on a tickle. You don't have to put on makeup, that kind of thing. That's showing up in person. If you think about the way we do Shiva, nobody says to somebody in Shiva, would you like me to bring you a meal? Yes. We just show up with the meal. Our Chazal has taught us the right way.
100%. 100%. Do you think, and so I guess just for, and so for the people who you don't have relationships with, would you say to how would you recommend that people would, if you hear about your coworker who you do not have a relationship with, or someone in your family who you're not close with, how would you recommend,
put it in writing. Put it in writing. Put it in writing. Put it in that card. Write a card. Doesn't have to be a card from Hallmark. No fancy dishes. No fancy wording. I heard what you've been going through. I'm so sorry for your loss. Sending you much love and strength your way. Love, Dvora. Put it in the card. If it's somebody in the office, leave it on their desk. Like, the nice things about the cards is that I can pick it up and I can choose to read it, and I can choose not to. I can choose to read it again. We had a situation where, like, when we were dealing with a family illness and people were sending cards to the house, and it was amazing to me is how the cards, my mother had this like slotted door in the kitchen, and the cards would like sit on the slots for months. Those cards were there. And every one of the children, as we would come in and visit, we would pick up cards and we'd read who wrote, and I think about how, you took the time to write the card, but it was strengthening to us as children and as extended family to read about the love and support from others. So it was much more than just that comment, was this ongoing nature of connection that a written document really offers.
I mean, just to bring it sort of to 2019 or 2020, I will often say to people, sometimes you don't know what their physical address is. You have their email address, or you do have a text. And I often recommend to people that that's also a way where people can choose to open the email if they want, or choose not. They can save it or delete it. And the same way, and also for a text.
Right. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I don't want to interrupt you. So the only thing I would caution about texting in specific, we're very commonly, we're using emojis, we're using shortened, abbreviated, kind of texting. The only thing I would encourage, and yes, it might be throwback, I might be aging myself, but I don't really care. I still think that there are certain things that don't warrant emojis and don't warrant abbreviations. So this would be one, texting anybody a BDE is not appropriate for Baruch Dynamis. It's I'm thinking of you. You are in my heart. I'm feeling your pain from across the ocean. Whatever words you can come up with, statements, not questions. And even if you could say, there's no need to respond, I'm letting you know that you're in my thoughts. So I actually always do that. I personally always do that. I always say, there's no need to respond. I'm just letting you know that I'm thinking about you. Exactly.
And often, even by saying that, I often do then get a response. from someone who I don't expect a response, but I
Correct.
think that because they've been given the allowance to just let it
Not.
sit, then they actually sort of then at that point
Right.
feel comfortable then responding.
Right. And I think that, and to acknowledge also that, like, remember the anniversaries. Like, it's not, and not only the anniversaries, you know, the hardest time for people that are going through a big family loss and a child loss is all of the things that happen in that year where that child is not present. So, like, you know, so many women will say, I was anticipating holding that baby on Simchas Torah. I was anticipating having another child to light a candle with on Friday night. So it's not just the immediate aftermath of the loss that is so painful. It goes beyond that. So if Erev Yontif, you text that mom or who you have a relationship with it, or you remember that anniversary and you can put it in your phone as a reminder that you know, that populates every year, that it says, I just want you to know that I remember baby blank, or if that baby had a name, and use that child's name if there was a name, and acknowledge what it was, not just that you're in pain. So I remember the baby that you lost a year ago, or I remember the death of your little boy, and I just want you to know that he is remembered. Find the words, but remember, even at an anniversary, is almost as important, if not more important, than in the immediate aftermath when they're, like, hopefully surrounded by support. Yes. But most people aren't remembering it 6 to 8 months later.
Yes, 100%. I do think that people, not I do think, we all know that people really appreciate those little, the little reminders and the little pieces months down the line. And they also appreciate the anniversaries as well.
Absolutely.
You know, there's a family that I've been working with for a very long time already, and their baby died right around Hanukkah. And as Hanukkah is approaching, right after Thanksgiving, you know, I always make contact with them because it's not even about the exact date. It's about once Hanukkah starts approaching, they start to get anxious. And
of course.
So it's about really just acknowledging that piece for them right as it's coming.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
I want to, just as we're starting to close, I just want to be mindful of the time. I also wanted to get your thoughts about secondary infertility, because this is something that I actually started doing a series on this week. And I've gotten many, many, many messages about secondary infertility, about how individuals who have secondary infertility are, they feel unseen in the fertility world, especially in the Jewish and frum infertility world, how they, to the outside world, how they really appear as if they're, quote unquote, you know, a typical family, that they have one child or other children already and are still desperate and longing for a second child or third, or et cetera.
Right.
And how do they manage those conflicting feelings of desperately wanting a child, struggling to have another child, while still sort of, you know, integrating with the community,
right.
being part of the community, their own family, et cetera, et cetera. So
right.
I, you know, wanted to get a little bit of your wisdom and a chizuk for some of these families, and also how we as a community can sort of be more sensitive to them as well.
Sure. I love that you were able to introduce that idea of, like, not just that the secondary infertility almost has a definition, and I don't even know if it's officially anymore as a clinical definition, as you have one and then you're not able to have a second. But I think that we have kind of used we use the term more broadly in terms of people who have 1, 2, 3 and then begin to struggle. I have women that have had 5 and then begin to struggle. And it seems like their bodies have just kind of turned against them or turned off, and they're no longer able to conceive successfully. Right. And I think what we have to be very mindful of are the assumptions that we make as community members. So we make assumptions either that they've chosen, they've decided to wait, right? And so people will make these, like, they think they're being so creative and clever, and they'll say things like, oh, you're so smart, you took a break, you know? And that taking a break, you know, does not necessarily mean that it was their choice to take that break. And sometimes you'll get a smart aleck who will respond, like me, who will say that wasn't exactly in my choice. But it would be something where we have to be more conscious of the words that we use. And I think as a communal level, what are the words we are using? I have a woman who said to me, I like going downtown, like to walk in, she's in New York, and to walk, you know, in Times Square with my 2 children, because in Times Square, it's normal for me to have 2 children. But in in Borough Park and in Williamsburg, 2 children is a very small family, and there's always should be considering another one coming. And so for her to feel normal, she has to go outside of her Orthodox world to feel normal with 2 children. So first and foremost, as a community, let us be more cautious about our assumptions. You know, we also are making assumptions that women that women can go ahead and have a second child. We don't know who has had a hysterectomy, emergent hysterectomy, or has had a catastrophic outcome that they're medically not able to have more children, or those women that, you know, are who are dealing with a mental health issue that they are being told do not have another baby right now, or a medical health issue that they say you cannot continue. And so, like, you know, let us be mindful of our assumptions and be conscious of our wording around others, so that we can always be a little bit more conscientious of what we say in front of others who have, quote unquote, only 1 or 2 or 3.
Absolutely.
And I think that recognizing that their pain is pain. And there is no comfort in saying, well, at least I have, right? Nothing starts with at least ever has a good outcome. So there's no comfort in saying, well, at least I have 2 children. If she says, at least I have these 2 that bring me joy and comfort, great. But it's never for anybody else to kind of put that bandage on and say, well, at least you have 2 children that give you nachas, you know? So it's not for us to try to make it feel better, more comfortable, something like that. So being mindful of the wording that we use, recognizing that they are in pain, and that, yes, it is a more hidden pain. And to those that are in struggle, you have to connect with others. You have to find your allies. If it's choosing to share with a personal friend, if it's choosing to share with one sibling who you think could get it, if it's choosing not to share with the rest of the family who may not get it, if it's choosing a best friend who can be that person that you can call and say, I'm just having a really awful day today. And it's okay if you need to not show up at that party. It's okay if you don't want to go to that next shower, that next baby shower. That it's okay if you set limits to, I'm going to go for an hour and then I'm going to leave. And really communicating what your needs are to your partner is also just as important. Giving each other permission to experience this absence in a way that works for you, rather than in a way that, as each of you experience it, not assuming that he will experience it differently, the same way that you, and that's giving each other permission to do it differently. Support and connection are the most important pieces here.
100%. Right. That's also a very interesting piece about how not often, I would say sometimes it's also that the couples themselves are not necessarily on the same page, that in terms of having another child. And it's possible also in this sort of journey, in this quote secondary, tertiary infertility, whatever you know what we want to call it, but that maybe it's going to take a little bit more than quote unquote just an IUI in order to have another child, or even in the case of, you know, losses after your 2nd, 3rd, or 4th, and then that trying for the next pregnancy. That's also another sort of, it's not really, I think the terminology is not secondary infertility, but it's this angst about trying to get pregnant again sort of falls in the same box a little bit. And how 2 people can be really on different pages in terms of the path to move forward. Right. And really support and communication and respecting each other's positions is really the key to making this relationship work and trying to figure out how to forge forward.
Yeah, for sure. And I think sometimes that's where there's a space for that 3rd person. Like sometimes that bringing in a therapist, bringing in a mediator, bringing in somebody, you know, bringing in somebody that can guide and support so that both sides get heard. Sometimes we get caught up in our own rhetoric. We don't get to hear the other person's side. And we really have to be able to hear each other's experiences of this process and really hear the pain of the other person, or the fear of the other person, the anxiety of the other person. But really you're talking about whenever there's an absence, like there's a vacancy here, right? There's a vacancy in my family. And how do I respect and address the vacancy that's in the family, or the space within the family?
Right. Look, these are, you know, we're touching on issues that obviously cannot be solved in a 40-minute or so, wherever we are, you know, Insta Live. But I really just want to thank you for giving us little pieces, little nuggets of your wisdom, because, you know, every piece that you share with us is really so valuable and applicable to so many different facets of the infertility and pregnancy loss journey, and really the fertility journey at large. And also, as we started off this segment, just the journey at large in general, as we
Absolutely.
as human beings to try to grapple with our own communities as different outside forces are coming in to try to, I think, try to push us in a way that we are not ready to be pushed.
Yeah. And I think it's so important, as I know that so much of what you're doing is about creating connection and resources. I really just want to, again, plug, the K'nafayim as a resource. I know that you can reach out to Amy, you can reach out to K'nafayim directly. Yesh Tikva, in which I'm a consultant with as well, has working very, very hard to bring additional awareness and support to those in struggle, making partners with people so that you're not doing this alone. And I think that there are resources out there. You got to know how to find them, and you got to know how to, and kind of, you got to trust us being the broader world,
yes,
that we can support you, and that it really matters to have another person that can speak the same language as you.
Yes, 100%. Look, that for me is the goal of this page.
Yes.
To bring people together, to tell people stories, and let you know that you personally, as you're reading at 2 o'clock in the morning, that you are not alone, but also to connect people with resources like Malki at K'nafayim, like you, who consults through lots of other organizations as well, but K'nafayim is your primary place.
Correct.
But to find the individuals and find the resources, because you should not have to do this alone. There is an entire community out there waiting to help you. So please, please, please find us. If any of you have any questions, any concerns, any comments about this live, you can message me, you can message Dvora, you can message me to message Dvora, et cetera, et cetera. That's what we're all here for. That's really the bottom line. Dvora, thank you so, so much.
Thank you.
Look, this is the beginning of a conversation. As I've said with all of my guests, we're now in the 9th installment, but the reality is I think we're going to do this probably until 20, and then we're going to start over again, because the reality is these conversations just continue.
They're timeless. They are timeless.
You cannot begin to cover any singular topic in this short amount of time.
No, but I'm grateful to you for putting it out there and continuing to put it out there, and really connecting people to resources. So big, so important. Thank you.
Amazing. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Happy
Hanukkah, everybody, for the last dwindling hours. And please let us know if you have any questions or any comments. We will take care of them. Okay.
All right, good. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.